Hello and welcome to the Star Wars Universe podcast. Today myself, Riki, and Sarah are talking about episodes 17, 18, 19, and 20 of Season 5 of the Clone Wars. This is the Ahsoka arc, an arc that is very important for her character. Even if you've never seen anything else from the Clone Wars, if you're interested in Ahsoka, if you're interested in where her character has been and what we can expect to see more of when she's back on the live action screen, these are definitely episodes you want to hear about. All that and more after a commercial break we have no control over. Welcome back. As I said, I'm Matthew, your host. I'm joined by Riki and Sarah. So what do you think, folks? These are some nice light episodes to take us after that intense stuff with Satine and Obi-Wan and Maul.
This is my favorite story. Wait a minute. Did I say that last week? I don't know. This whole season is amazing.
Yeah, I remembered all the stuff I said about how the last four was one of my absolute favorites. And then I remember, because I watched all these episodes the first time, just kind of zooming through in that way where like you kind of forget where one season ends and another begins. And so I forgot that this set of episodes comes next, and just, this is, I think, just the entertainment value, the movingness, the entertainment value, the way in which they're moving and just powerful episodes is great. But I also think in terms of like what they set up for all the stuff that's been coming afterwards, especially the Ahsoka TV show we're getting and her character appearing in Mandalorian, I think these 4 episodes are some of the most significant we get.
Yeah. I also thought that these were later. And that could just be because of the last season of Clone Wars, which recently came out, has a major Ahsoka focus. So I think I might have assumed that this was part of that. But right. Yeah, it is very... like, it sets a lot of stuff in motion. It also, like, fills in a lot of gaps that need to be filled in. I feel like I'll expand more on that once we actually get to the stuff. It's, I don't know. I guess it's not really spoilery since we're assuming that you've seen the episodes, right?
Yeah, but I'll say right now, if you've not seen these episodes yet, if you've mostly been following along and not watching the Clone Wars show, that's great. That's the whole point of this. If you're going to watch any 4 episodes, I would pretty strongly recommend these 4 and then some of part 7, season 7. So if you want to pause, watch those, and then come back in a day or two, or if you're like me, in a couple hours, do that great. If not, definitely just keep listening. We'll try to fill you in if you haven't seen them, but know that we will be spoiling them starting now. So yeah, go ahead.
Starting right now.
Yeah, because obviously like Ahsoka needs to leave before we get into the next prequel movie. So having her, like, that needs to be set up somehow. But right. Even then, like, knowing that that's going to happen, her, like, declining to rejoin the Jedi Order is still, like, such a big moment and, like, pretty surprising.
Yeah. So let's give a summary of the episodes, both for those who may have forgotten because they saw a long time ago, or those who aren't watching. We start with a scene on the planet of Cato Neomodia, where Ahsoka and Anakin are fighting a battle, and Anakin gets in trouble, and it's Ahsoka who saves him. But they're called back to Coruscant to carry out an investigation because a terrorist bombing has been done at the Jedi Temple. And we're now investigating, and there's kind of a long sort of mystery plot where we're chasing someone, and Anakin and Ahsoka are going pretty intense in the interrogation and attempt to catch a suspect. And at a later point then, the suspect, who's the wife of the person who it seems was like a suicide bomber at first, that person, we discover that the wife actually kind of basically fed him the bomb through these nanobite type things. And so she seems guilty. They arrest her, but she's now claiming that people made her do it. And Ahsoka goes to meet with her in her jail cell, and she's telling Ahsoka that it was one of the Jedi who made her do this, and she's just about to reveal the name when, in perfect movie star way, she starts to be choked. What clearly looks like she's being force choked. And we as the audience, it's very clear that Ahsoka is not doing this. But to the security cameras that have conveniently had the sound turned off for some reason, it looks to all the world like Ahsoka has done this. So Ahsoka they want to arrest her. She goes on the run. While she's on the run, she winds up teaming up with Asajj Ventress to create the best buddy cop movie in all of history. That, damn it, Disney, be brave and give us that movie or give us that show, because the two of them have phenomenal chemistry together. There's reasons why we maybe can't do it from the books, but I don't care. Ahsoka and Asajj Ventress together are just the greatest thing ever. But so they wind up working together and connecting over the fact that both of them are kind of on the outs with their respective organizations, because Asajj is realizing the problems that, the Sith kicked her out, and Ahsoka is feeling like the Jedi kicked her out. And all this time, Anakin is both chasing after her, but also trying to prove her innocence. Eventually, Ahsoka winds up fighting someone with red lightsabers, very much believing that it's Asajj Ventress. And Ahsoka is caught by the Jedi, and the Jedi believe she's completely guilty. She claims that no, Asajj totally set her up. Anakin tries to defend her, but it's very clear that the Jedi are not here to hear her what she has to say. And because they've been pushed to do this by Tarkin, who's now kind of a high-ranking person in the military, they officially kick her out of the Jedi. Because the rule is that only the Jedi can try the Jedi, and so Tarkin and the Senate want to try her as on their terms. So she has to be kicked out of the Jedi so that she can be held responsible for her theoretical crimes in that venue. It's a very painful setting. It's really awful to watch. But she's arrested. She's put on trial. And it looks like she's going to be convicted. And just before the sentence is read, Anakin bursts in to announce what he found out, which is that the true criminal was Barriss Offee. Barriss is another Padawan who had kind of had some interactions with Ahsoka at various points in the show beforehand. And she makes clear that she did this because she believes the Jedi have lost their way, that the war is the Jedi's fault, that the Jedi have lost the view of the light and only see the darkness, and that, therefore, this is why she did it. The Jedi Council is all like, oh no, Ahsoka, we're so sorry, we didn't mean that, oops, our bad, even going to the point of sort of implying that this was all a test and that she did so well. And they offer her the chance to rejoin, and Ahsoka says thanks, but no thanks, and ends the episode, and thus ends the season, basically like turning her back on Anakin and on the Jedi and walking out into the world.
The end.
The end.
Well, so I think it's worth noting this is the end of season 5.
Yep.
And the writers were not sure if they were going to be renewed. So they had to write this in a way that this could be the end of the series. And as Sarah said earlier, you have to write off Ahsoka somehow so that you can have Revenge of the Sith without Ahsoka, and it makes sense.
Right.
And of course, they got renewed. They kind of got a half a 6th season that was released as the Lost Missions, and then recently they finally got a 7th season.
Yeah.
But it was very much like Buffy the Vampire Slayer or Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D., which Sarah and I recently watched, where after season 5 there was this conclusion that could have been the end of the show, and then we got renewed, so we have to kind of like write some more stuff after that. But this could have been a very satisfying ending to the series.
For sure. Because not only does it write Ahsoka out, and like the way we say that, it could have been done very clunkily. But honestly, I felt like this is a brilliant story for her. And it also, and Sarah, I'm not sure if this is tell me if you would agree with this, that this is kind of what you were getting at before. I feel like so many of the themes that we've been talking about in pretty subtle ways really are brought to the forefront. Chancellor Palpatine is kind of in charge of the trial, and we see it very clearly that he's kind of trying to drive a wedge between the Republic and the Jedi. The accusations that Barriss makes against the Jedi are pretty much the stuff we've been seeing this whole time. I mean, it's terrible that she did this attack and killed people, but like at least I kind of felt like she's pretty much right, and that Ahsoka is kind of the audience stand-in for all of us as we're really starting to see the brokenness of the Jedi and how much they have fallen. And so just with that and with some of the other things, it just felt like it highlighted so many of the themes that have been building for these last 5 seasons. And you're right, I think set it up in a way where if this is what leads in... Oh, and I'd say the last big thing is it also really shows how much Anakin is wrestling with being part of the Jedi, because he clearly is upset about what they do to Ahsoka. We see that his personal allegiance to Ahsoka is much stronger than his allegiance to the Jedi themselves. And he gets mad at her when she feels like she wants to walk out, because it's pretty clear that in some level he wishes he could too. And he kind of says that to her. So yeah, and we'll get into each one of those plot points in a bit, but I feel like there's just so many ways in which these episodes just kind of put a point on all these themes that have been building.
Yeah, totally. I completely agree. And that's sort of what I was getting at. It does sort of put like a neat little bow around the themes that we've been talking about, but not in a forced way. Like it nicely wraps up a lot of these themes that we've been talking about. And yeah, like knowing that you have to get rid of Ahsoka before the series ends, it could have just been like, and now she falls down a trash chute and is dead, right? Like there could have been a lot of less satisfying conclusions to the series, even though this isn't actually the series conclusion. But leaving her as just like wandering off to like go find herself, basically, still leaves that door open for her to come back in the future, like we saw recently in this 7th season that came back on Disney Plus just a couple years ago. Less than a year ago? How does time work? I don't know.
And I feel like, there's all these wonderful moments sometimes when you can go... like, generally I don't like prequels because often I feel like they kind of fill in details in the wrong ways, or it kind of takes away from the significance of some things, and I think it's a lot of people's complaints about a lot of the prequels. I feel like, having seen only a couple months ago Ahsoka saying with such vehemence to the Mandalorian, as to why she won't train Grogu, Baby Yoda, it's because she is not a Jedi. And then seeing these episodes and being reminded why, even so many years later, she's so clear that like she's a light side of the Force using Force user, but she's not a Jedi. It really hits home for me, like getting to see why is it that she's not a Jedi and why is that still strong for her.
Yeah, totally. And even like when the Jedi Order is like asking her to come back, basically, or they're not even asking her to come back. They're telling her that they're going to accept her back, right? Assuming that her coming back is like a foregone conclusion. And like you've got Master Mundi and Plo Koon. And Obi-Wan's there, but he doesn't say anything. But, like, Master Mundi and Plo Koon have been important figures in Ahsoka's life and, like, training as a Padawan. And they give some pretty impassioned speeches about how, like, we're sorry we're wrong. Please come back to us. And then Mace Windu gives this, like, well, the Force works in mysterious ways. This was all a test. You passed the test. Come on back. I think at that moment she's just like, nah. Like, if you're just gonna say this is how the Force works and not even admit wrongdoing here, then like why would I come back to this? And I think she knew from the get-go, right? Like when she's running away after there's the security footage of her seemingly choking, is it Letta was the name of the wife, I think.
I believe that's correct, yeah.
Like she knows that she's got to run, right? And it's Anakin's telling her like, oh, just turn yourself in, you're gonna get a fair trial, don't worry about it. But she already knows, like, nah, I'm not gonna get a fair trial. They think I've done this. I have to go find evidence that I haven't before coming back.
Right. And I think that's one of the most interesting and also hardest parts of this is, like, she's right. I mean, she very much does not get a fair trial. She walks into this courtroom that looks like not like a place for a fair trial. All the Jedi are high up and making her feel small and insignificant. And
well, you talk about the Jedi chamber, like the count. What do they call it? The Chamber of Judgment or something?
Yeah, it's very exactly. Like shadowy figures.
The actual courtroom where the Republic puts her on trial.
Right, but even before that, like when Yoda just announces like we believe that you're guilty and so we are kicking you out of the Jedi Order. She starts to make her defense, but it becomes like they admit, like, yes, we have already made our decision. We don't care what you have to say.
Isn't it? Does he actually say that they think she's guilty or that they think she needs to be tried in military tribunal?
The impression I got was certainly that they think that it's true enough that she's guilty that they're kicking her out of the Order.
Yeah, so the reason they have to... are even debating this in the first place is, yeah, like you mentioned, Tarkin, who's not yet an admiral, but I think he's like Commander Tarkin or something like that.
Right.
They refer to him as Admiral.
Admiral at this point? Okay.
I think he was already an admiral when we met him previously.
Oh, interesting. I didn't think he was Admiral.
Actually, no, he might have been Captain. No, he was Captain Tarkin in the prison because he was the captain of the ship that the Jedi was on.
Okay, so yeah, Tarkin's an Admiral now.
Yeah, he's been promoted.
And he and his cheekbones are telling the Jedi Council that, like, you can't just have this internal trial. Like, that doesn't look good. People are already starting to question the Jedi as this, like, all-seeing, all-knowing force, right? So you have to turn Ahsoka over for military tribunal. Like, you have to let her get a public trial. Mm-hmm. We have to try her in public, basically, because even though Ahsoka, before Ahsoka even goes into the prison to have this confrontation, there's rumors that, like, the Jedi were responsible for the bombing of the Jedi Temple, right. And that's going all around Coruscant. So, like, people are suspicious of the Jedi already.
Yeah, I mean, I think one of the things that it really brings out is that, to me, there's two really interesting dynamics that come to play there. One is that there's already a lot of suspicion and a lot of distrust of the Jedi, and this whole situation really brings that out and makes Ahsoka sort of confront it in ways she never realized. And also that some of the Jedi are, like, Mace Windu especially, honestly seems a lot more concerned with the image of the Jedi than actually figuring out the truth here. Like, I feel like Mace is one of the people who comes out looking the worst in this whole thing.
Oh, for sure. And I haven't been a Mace fan since the get-go. But yeah, and Obi-Wan protests, right? And is like, no, like, we should just try Ahsoka as the Jedi Order, because that's what we've been doing for forever, and that's what we're going to do. Right. But he obviously gets, like, outvoted. And Yoda mentions that when they have this, like, meetings of shadowy figures, which, yeah, is almost comically, like, evil. They're, yeah, like you said, they're all in these, like, individual, like, alcoves in their high chairs looking down on Ahsoka and Anakin.
They were doing everything but wearing their robes to hide their faces.
Yeah, it was a lot.
In the candlelight.
And then, like, we get a couple shots of Obi-Wan looking pissed off. And yeah, Yoda mentions, like, we weren't unanimous about this, but we're deciding to release you from the Order to have this military tribunal. And that, like, somebody has to, like, the person who's going to defend you isn't even going to be from the Jedi Order, because that in itself would look bad. So they get Padme to defend Ahsoka.
Right.
To remind us that the character exists.
That Padme exists. Yeah.
I have to kind of say, also as an aside here, there's so much in here that I love. One theme that I was definitely uncomfortable with, and I wondered how much it is intentional, is, you know, basically in this world, the Jedi function kind of like cops or like military. And in the first episode, the way Ahsoka and Anakin are treating things is like, you know, if this was a cop show, these would not be our heroes necessarily. Like, they're being very harsh in their interrogation. In some ways, I was a little upset that Lita turns out to be guilty, because they basically assume that just because she runs that she must be guilty. Like, Ahsoka basically says that. Yeah, she says, running proves you have nothing to hide. And they're very bloodthirsty almost. Like, Ahsoka is, you know, saying that, like, she needs to be dealt with, this person. They're both really letting their anger get away with them. And so that was already kind of like, you know, definitely like hard to watch. But then in the scene when Obi-Wan and some of the others are arguing that, like, only the Jedi should investigate the Jedi, I felt like I was in a really hard position, because on the one hand, I'm thinking, like, yes, in this particular situation, it does seem like Ahsoka is being railroaded, and turning her over to the Republic and to Palpatine doesn't seem like a good idea. But as a general idea, the rule that only cops can investigate cops, only the Jedi can investigate the Jedi, is not really a very good one. So I definitely was like, I was really conflicted by those scenes. I hope that was kind of the point of showing that, like, yes, this is what the Jedi would do, and it makes kind of sense in the situation, but also, if the Jedi are the only ones who get to police the Jedi, even when they harm civilians, it kind of drives home one more reason why people don't trust the Jedi.
Yeah, totally. And I completely agree. Like, when Tarkin is giving them the speech that, like, you can't just have an internal trial for this and call it a day. Like, I'm like, yeah, that makes sense. But, like, we know that Tarkin is not a good guy and that Palpatine is not a good guy. So,
What?
spoiler, sorry. But yeah, like, without knowing that, it sounds like a very logical thing to say, right? And it's like, yeah, of course I agree that they shouldn't just have this internal trial.
Right.
And I also want to talk, like, what you said about Ahsoka saying running means you've got something to hide. Like, I also wish that Leto wasn't guilty, because then she runs, like Ahsoka runs, right? And she has nothing to hide, but she's just finished saying, like, well, if you run, you're guilty, therefore.
And I think that's very intentional. I think kind of brilliant screenwriting of like putting Ahsoka in that same place that she put Lita in.
Mm-hmm. And then I guess having like Lita be guilty and her not be, like, right? It's like, haha, I proved it. Running meant you were guilty. Therefore, if you run, you are guilty.
Mm-hmm.
Mind made up, and it's like, oh no, now I have to run.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, she didn't kill her wife.
What? Oh, Ahsoka didn't. What? Huh? Who didn't kill their wife?
It's a reference.
Okay. Yeah, I feel like in some ways the other big theme that I get out of this
is the fugitive. So there's a scene after she escapes from prison where she's running through the sewers of Coruscant, like these giant human-sized or being-sized pipes, being chased by clones and Anakin. And Anakin corners her like on a ledge where one of the pipes is emptying water into something else.
Uh-huh.
And they have a talk at the edge of the ledge, and he's like, come back, like, I'll help you fight this. And she's like, no, I have to like do this on my own and figure out what's going on. And she jumps. That was a direct reference to the movie Fugitive.
Also starring Harrison Ford.
Yeah. I'm amazed I didn't recognize that at first, but you're completely right. That's brilliant, the way that's done.
But in the scene in The Fugitive, Harrison Ford's character says, I didn't kill my wife, and Tommy Lee Jones, the Marshal, U.S. Marshal, says, I don't care. Yeah.
Does Harrison Ford do the finger shake when he says he doesn't kill his wife?
He might have.
That's good.
I think he does do it in that movie at some point.
Yeah, it's a great movie.
What is it? Sorry, go ahead.
The reason, though, the why I bring that up is, for me, this is kind of another theme that this highlights, is when I watch the prequels, one of my first questions is, okay, if you have all the clone troopers under your command, that's one thing. But the whole galaxy has thought for so long that the Jedi are the guardians of peace and justice. And I think that's not the right phrase. It's peace and guardians of peace in this world. And I've always kind of wondered, like, why does the rest of the Senate just believe Palpatine and go along with the idea that, oh, actually these people who are completely our heroes are now suddenly terrible? And I feel like all of the Clone Wars, but especially these 4 episodes, I now much better understand why the people are so willing to believe that the Jedi are corrupt and that the Jedi are traitors, because they really highlight how much distrust there is, and frankly how much that's the Jedi's fault with their hubris and their arrogance and just kind of condescension to everybody.
Yeah, well, Lita is part of a group who's basically like protesting the Jedi and thinking the Jedi are warmongers, and they have like signs that say like no more clones and stuff like that when they're out protesting. And yeah, so like it totally makes sense that this narrative of, like you were saying, that the Jedi are warmongers goes through, because in a way they kind of are, right? Like, I mean, sure, they're being manipulated by Palpatine to do it, but they're still doing it.
And Tarkin even has kind of fun with that at one point, where he's explaining how more and more he's explaining that the Emperor wants the role of the Jedi to be kind of curtailed somewhat, and he says, don't you keep reminding us that you're peacekeepers, you're not soldiers. Yeah,
which is good. Like, I liked that moment too, where he reminds them, like, you're always talking about how you're peacekeepers.
I wrote down, and in that same vein, I think let's talk for a minute about Barriss and her motivations, because I have to say, I was so happy when she gives her speech and, reveals why she does it, and she's not a separatist. She's not a Sith. Like, she's flirting with the dark side a little bit, and she kind of likes the red lightsabers, but the reason she gives are, it's not a mwahaha, Dooku and Palpatine got me to do this. It's, she genuinely believes that the Jedi have lost their way. And this is her speech, and I'm going to quote the whole thing because I think it's brilliant. I did it because I've come to realize what many people in the Republic have come to realize, that the Jedi are the ones who are responsible for this war, that we've so lost our way that we have become villains in this conflict, that we are the ones who should be put on trial, all of us. And my attack on the temple was an attack on what the Jedi have become, an army fighting for the dark side, fallen from the light that we once held so dear. This Republic is failing. It's only a matter of time. I can't find the lie in that.
Yeah. I mean, the whole, like, I did it thing coming at, like, as Anakin is saying, I have proof that it was Barriss who did it, seems like a little disingenuous, I suppose. Like, Barriss is more than willing to let Ahsoka take the fall for this, and doesn't come forward until she's been caught. Right. But yeah, I mean, I don't think she's necessarily wrong in what she says, but she's definitely wrong in what she does, right?
Barriss spent a lot of time setting Ahsoka up. Mm-hmm. You know, she broke her out of prison, like, seated her lightsabers at the exit so she would pick them up. She confided in us, like, so there was a funeral for some of the Jedi who had died in the explosion, and then Barriss and Ahsoka are, like, talking to each other. Barriss is, like, very upset, and Ahsoka's, like, helping her, and Barriss is, like, confiding in her, so that when Ahsoka does break out of prison, she ends up calling Barriss and, like, asking Barriss for help, and Barriss is like, oh, I've got a map, you should go to this area. Yeah, she leads Ahsoka to a factory that has the nanodroids that she probably used in the bombing, and then fights Ahsoka there in disguise as Ventress, and then drops her, like, knocks her down into the chamber just as the clones come in. So they're like, she's in this chamber with the nanodroid, she's guilty. So she spends all this effort setting her up. And then when Anakin catches her, she's like, oh yeah, it was me. And only me. Which is weird. Like, I understand, like, if she's caught, she wants to make this speech. And it was a good speech. But you would think she would at least still also just be like, we did it together. I was in on it with Ahsoka. So that part was kind of weird, that it just so cleanly lets Ahsoka off the hook.
I think it kind of makes sense, because I think she's going to drive the bigger wedge here, because, I mean, she knows Ahsoka quite well. And so she must kind of know that, you know, putting Ahsoka in this position where everyone now knows how much they screwed up is maybe kind of a way to drive that wedge there. But also I kind of think, like, you know, it's that thing where, like, you've hidden your secret for so long, and you know, you want to be able to tell everybody why you did this thing, but you can't, and now you get the chance, and you don't want to share the credit. You want to let everyone see, like, look what I did.
Yeah, the villain monologue.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. I was a little confused about the timeline, because I thought that Barriss did it because she was sad that this person died in the explosion, but that doesn't make sense, because she was the one who, like, caused the explosion. So I don't, like, is she showing genuine remorse there when she's at this eulogy for the Jedi who were lost in the explosion, or is she just, like, trying to reel Ahsoka in?
I believe her master has died, right?
It was like a training companion.
A training buddy who was kind to her.
Yeah.
I believe it
taught him how to hold his lightsaber. Yeah.
But also, didn't her master die? Like,
Her master is dead, but not in this explosion.
Not in the explosion, yeah.
Right.
So that leads to her fall as well, is that she's lost someone in the war.
Right. Yeah, I kind of saw it as two ways. One is I saw it as it might be kind of a, like, she wanted to kill nameless, faceless Jedi, but not necessarily, like, this one particular person who was so close to her. But also I think it's possible that she kind of sees it as, like, I know these people had to die, but I still feel a lot of grief over it, you know. And I think that's something we've definitely seen from other villains before, not in the Star Wars universe often, because it's kind of a very nuanced idea, but the sort of, like, I know I have to do this, and I know I have to attack my former comrades, but I still hate doing it because they are my former comrades. Like, there's a moment where she and Ahsoka are talking after the funeral, and she's very gentle about this. And so I only kind of noticed it, I think, because I knew this time I was watching, I knew that Barriss was going to turn out to be the traitor. And she kind of, like, very gently presents the idea to Ahsoka of, like, well, But do you think maybe those folks who distrust the Jedi so much might have a reason to? I got the sense that in that moment she's kind of trying to decide if she can recruit Ahsoka, and like maybe feeling out like, I know other Jedi agree with me, like maybe Ahsoka does too.
Yeah, maybe. I guess like so. Even though I'd seen this and like knew Barris did something at some point, when I watched the first 2 episodes, I was like, "Ooh, this is the girl who betrays Ahsoka." In later episodes in like a couple seasons from now. So I don't think I really put together that like, oh no, these are the episodes where she sets Ahsoka up. So I wasn't like really keyed into it so much. It just like, it seemed like a very logical, I guess, statement to make. Like she was just being sort of empathetic with this idea that maybe the Jedi are to blame. But yeah, it could have been like just to feel out Ahsoka or just genuine feeling.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, for sure.
I just wanted to like throw in a quick correction to what we said. So Barris's master is Luminara Unduli, and like she doesn't die until like after Order 66.
Oh,
okay.
Yeah,
cool.
So she like I think she survives Order 66. What is this? Like yeah, she evaded the fate and was like shot down on Kashyyyk way later. I don't know where she is. Why isn't she looking out for Barris? Like the last time we saw Barris was when it was her and Unduli were together, and I think like Obi-Wan and Anakin and Unduli went off on something, and then Ahsoka and Barris got stuck on like a planet together. Right. But yeah, I don't know where is she? Why isn't she watching her Padawan and her Padawan's turn to this dark side? Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, we often saw Anakin and Ahsoka go off in different ways, and I think it may be significant because Riki, you pointed out that like losing her master could well be a part of sort of what helps to radicalize her, and maybe it's not that she lost her master, but her master kind of stopped paying attention to her. I mean, one thing we saw in earlier
busy with the war.
Yeah. I mean, one thing we saw in earlier seasons was that she was very much like Little Miss Perfect. Like she was always the perfect Padawan who, Ahsoka could never match up to, and maybe that wasn't a great relationship she had with her master, and that her master now is like, oh, okay, you're perfect, you know everything. I don't need to pay attention to you. Or this is all headcanon at this point, but I can certainly see it making sense. Mm-hmm. So, what did you all think of Asajj Ventress coming into the story and teaming up with Ahsoka for a little while?
I thought it was good, but I also like the Clone Wars TV series. Like the entire show is wedged between the 2 movies, and we know that's a 3-year gap.
Right. And
even then, like, Asajj has been a villain for at least the first half of the run of this series. So we're looking at most, like, maybe 6 months since she was last a villain. Mm-hmm. And I do think it was a little... The timeline is too condensed for how much they trust her. Like, both Ahsoka and then later Anakin. Mm-hmm. But, I mean... I do like the character and her interactions with Ahsoka.
Yeah, I don't like this team up as much as the Obi-Wan Ventress team up, for sure. But I don't even know if there is like as much of a trust. Like Anakin for sure trusts Ventress too much, but Ahsoka, like when she runs into her, Ventress is basically like, I'm a bounty hunter now. I'm hunting you for bounty. And Ahsoka and Ventress kind of team up out of this need, not necessarily want. I don't even think that Ahsoka trusts Ventress, because later when Barris comes back disguised as Ventress, Ahsoka's just like, I knew it. I knew you'd betray me.
Yeah.
Like...
Yeah, I think they're just starting to trust each other. And in many ways, it's not even that they trust each other. It's that I think, especially Ventress actually says this, that she comes to have some sympathy and understanding and to see a connection between the two of them. And I think at this point, Ventress sees that much more, I think, than Ahsoka does. But watching this did make me hope that after Ahsoka commits to leaving the Order, I have always had this hope that at some point Ahsoka and Ventress find each other again and are able to build some kind of camaraderie around the idea that both of them have seen the flaws in their respective organizations and are kind of meeting somewhere in the middle. Like I said, I think that would be a great buddy movie, basically.
Well, never read any of the books.
Yeah, no, I know. I understand it from the books that we know how Ventress's story ends. I'm not going to spoil anything, but It would have to probably be a canon break of some kind, but some part of me is still holding out that we get that story somewhere, because we only get them on screen for like 5 minutes together, but I just love their dynamic so much.
But something interesting that I was thinking of is that Barriss Offee survives, right? I mean, she's arrested and they take her away, and that's the last we see of her on this series. Mm-hmm. But who knows where her story ends, and maybe there's a future TV series or something with Barriss and Ahsoka teaming up after Order 66.
Ooh,
because it's like, oh, you were right. Like, this is messed up.
I could see that. I could also see, she's clearly not dark side yet. She's clearly not Sith I mean, she might be flirting with the dark side for sure, but she's not Sith. She's not working for the Separatists. But all of her thoughts are so anti-Jedi, and Palpatine is so involved, which, by the way, now I'm clearly hearing Tim Curry's voice, and it's wonderful.
Yeah.
I kind of wonder if maybe Palpatine kind of visits her in jail a couple times and talks to her about her feelings about the Jedi, and talks about how he shares the same concerns, and kind of, I mean, we see him, how good he is at this kind of, I don't mean this in a romantic way, but the seduction, the bringing someone over. I could see her becoming one of the Inquisitors, someone who becomes a dark side user and is working for Vader and Palpatine to hunt down the Jedi in the early years after Order 66.
Yeah,
we don't know, but I think that'd be a great thing to see further explored.
That's certainly possible. I mean, if she's in prison, he would have very easy access to her, and as you said, could easily turn her at this point.
Right.
Yeah, and I think Barriss's just total willingness to throw Ahsoka under the bus, and not like, it even seemed like Riki, like you said, like she set Ahsoka up to be thrown under the bus, would like preclude any sort of team up, despite how like Ahsoka seeing like, oh yeah, Barriss was right. I don't think she could forgive the whole like, and then she set me up to take the fall angle.
Yeah. But again, like Ventress,
yeah.
The way they treat Ventress in this episode, like, oh, you're cool now.
Ventress has been cool the whole time. But yeah.
Well, and I'm going to say this very carefully because I don't want to spoil anything, but in a later part of the story, the overall Star Wars story, we do see that Ahsoka is quite willing to team up with someone purely for her own advantage, even if she doesn't trust them. So, in kind of a very cold-blooded way, which makes sense for her. But like, I certainly think that we're learning that Ahsoka is willing to work with whoever she needs to work with when she's in a tough spot.
Yeah, I have things to say about that, but it's very spoilery. Okay. So I won't.
We'll definitely be getting to it this year, I promise.
Yeah.
So
what were some other dynamics about this?
I want to go back to talking about Palpatine for a sec.
Let's do it.
Sheev. Yeah. So first of all, I agree with what Riki was saying last week about how, I don't know if he said this on the podcast or as to me as a human, but Tim Curry makes a better Lord Sidious than Sheev Palpatine. Mm-hmm. And I agree, although I love Tim Curry dearly. When he's speaking at Ahsoka's trial, he's not the one who's persecuting Ahsoka. Prosecuting, sorry. Not persecuting. He's not the one who's prosecuting Ahsoka. That's Tarkin. But he still has this speech about how now we have seen how evil the Jedi are. Mm-hmm. And it's very Ahsoka's guilty. And it just seems like a strange speech to be giving. Not strange for Palpatine's character, but strange in if we pull the lens back, why would the judge, why would just some neutral party be giving this speech about looks like she's guilty?
I think we're supposed to believe that the Republic does not have what we would call a fair and just judicial system. This whole trial feels very much like a show trial. It happens very quickly. The political leader is the judge. This military figure is the prosecuting attorney. A senator is the defense lawyer, not an actual lawyer. It definitely feels like this is not it's not that the citizens of the Republic are expecting the absolute pristine legal proceeding and are horrified to see what happens. I think the point you're making about how Curry is a better Sidious than Palpatine makes a lot of sense. And I think it's kind of fitting because I think it's kind of Sidious, like, revealing himself a lot more. Showing, like, still, like, there's an extent to which I've sometimes seen when people are, like, pulling something over on someone, that there's a part of them that is just so amazed they haven't been caught, that they're kind of, like, being like, oh, okay, well, can I go this far without you catching me? Can I go this far without you catching me? And I think he's just so delighted that he's pulling this over on the Jedi, that he's still being careful, but he knows that Order 66 is coming, and he wants to just keep planting these seeds of getting the people more and more upset at the Jedi.
Yeah, he's just walking around with a cookie jar-sized bulge under his chancellor robes.
Oh my god! Oh,
what?
This is no!
He's hiding the cookie jar in his robes. What are you?
God. Okay, you did not make that clear.
The hand in the cookie jar.
Hand in the cookie jar. Sure. Mm-hmm. Okay. Anyway, not thinking about any sort of bulges under Palpatine's robe. It seems weird that he's doing this to Ahsoka, who he knows is Anakin's Padawan, who he's trying to set up to come to the dark side, right? Like, I feel like this would undermine his relationship with Anakin. I mean, I guess, like, Anakin's not in the room right now, so maybe he feels like, I don't know, like, better saying it, but it's still, like, how is he going to justify this to Anakin later? And he doesn't have to.
Again, because it's not clear what the legal proceedings here are.
Right.
Because presumably, like, he's not the judge or the jury, right? Like, that's what we're trying to say. It's like, is he the one who makes the decision? Or is there, like, the senators watching? Someone
hands him written down the decision by the jury. I think he's supposed to be the judge, and he's very much not the jury.
Yeah.
Okay.
So this could still be part of his plan of separating Anakin from Ahsoka.
Right.
And then being like, there was nothing I could do for your Padawan, Anakin.
Because everybody else decided she was bad. Or,
right.
like, because she was bad.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. And I think there's a couple of things there. I think one is, we all know what we're looking for, so we see, like, Palpatine's machinations as the judge pretty clearly. But I do think for the people there, it's still kind of subtle. Like, he's not just like, mwahaha, clearly you're guilty. He lets the jury make the decision. He's kind of making these subtle comments. And also, I think, like I said, I think one of the things I like about this is I don't think he planned this at all. I think he kind of put the pieces in motion that he thought something like this was probably going to happen at some point, but to me, this is kind of him on the fly being like, oh, well, this is a wonderful gift to drop in my lap. And oh, hey, if I do this right, I'm going to really drive a stronger wedge between Anakin and the Jedi. And I think he's thinking that Anakin is going to be so angry at the Jedi that, frankly, he's not even going to notice what Palpatine's doing. Because that just is, Anakin feels so betrayed, and Anakin is starting to wonder, should he leave as well?
Yeah. Yeah, that's fair. And I agree that, like, I don't think Palpatine orchestrated this, but I do think that, Palpatine was the one who sent Tarkin to tell the Jedi to give Ahsoka the boot. Like, for sure, right?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I think that's him taking advantage of the situation once it came up.
It could be. Or it could be Tarkin acting on his own. We know that he's very ambitious.
Right.
And I think
very anti-Jedi, too.
Yeah, he sees this as a way to gain power and the upper hand on the Jedi. And speaking of Anakin being angry, just in general, the fights that he has in this arc, he has a fight against Asajj Ventress, and then he has a fight against Barriss. And both of them, he is very angry. He's very violent. It would not have been surprising at all to see him kill either one of them in the duels. Like, that's how he acts.
Yeah.
And I think we're supposed to see that because this is the potential, final act before Revenge of the Sith. So seeing him, go to that edge, and then, of course, at the beginning of Revenge of the Sith, he murders Dooku. So, like, it reaches that conclusion where it would be a very logical next step.
Yeah. I mean, in some ways, I know this was written later, but if you make the central story of his fall in Revenge of the Sith that Palpatine's talking to him about what happened to poor Ahsoka instead of it being all about, like, your dying wife, I think that would be a lot more believable and a lot more powerful.
Yeah, or even just, like, in addition to your dying wife.
Right.
right? Like not having that be the sole reason.
Yeah, because in a lot of those talks, he's telling Anakin that he can't trust the Jedi. That both, like, Palpatine can't trust them, and that Anakin shouldn't trust them. And yeah, just having him say, like, look what they did to Ahsoka.
Yeah, definitely. Definitely.
Like, I do, like, the fight between Anakin and Barriss is, like, so cool. Because for, like, Anakin... So I think, like, Anakin is pretty sure that Barriss has like, orchestrated this and set it up so that, like, Ahsoka thinks it's Ventress, but everybody else thinks it's Ahsoka. Is, like, currently where it's at. But Anakin has figured out that this is Barriss all along. So he goes to Barriss's chambers. Anakin grabs her lightsaber off of a little, like, altar that she's got. And they're just having a little chat about, like, oh, this is so unfortunate. And then Anakin, knowing that he's got Barriss's lightsaber, activates his own and, like, just swipes at her face, basically, causing Barriss to grab Ventress's sabers and use them to defend herself. But, like, that's a big gamble, right? Like, if you are wrong, you're just slicing Barriss in half.
Yeah. I mean, I think that's exactly right. And that kind of what both you were saying, that Anakin's not really making high-level, rational, well-thought-out decisions. He's mad.
And it, like, kind of reminded me of the like, and now you have to go murder a bunch of Jedi babies. Yeah. Right? Like, he would have done it? I don't know. Like, I guess he was really, really convinced that he was right, and he was. But, like, yikes. Yeah.
I mean, I think I've commented before that I feel like watching this show makes Revenge of the Sith make a lot more sense because you much better understand why Anakin fell. And I feel like these 4 episodes really drive that home. You know, it's him losing himself to anger. It's all of his anger at the Jedi. It's all of his frustration. It's all of his feeling like, you know, he's not being listened to. You know, think about where this all started. Anakin didn't want a Padawan, and he was not good to her, and he, you know, was calling her snips and just like
he does it in this arc.
Well, okay, yeah, that's not even the point. That's not.
It's like example, endearing now, but yeah, he was very, like, belittling and like, I'm too good for this. Yeah, and they honestly, like, didn't they give him Ahsoka not because they thought that, oh, Ahsoka, you have so much to learn from Anakin, but more like, Anakin, you need to fall into line. Here's a Padawan.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think they gave it to him because they thought it would help him, you know, calm down and, like, well, if you're going to have to be a role model of being a good Jedi. That didn't work out. But yeah, I feel like it really highlights that, you know, Anakin is emotional, he's vengeance focused, he's anger focused, and he's deeply attached. And when those attachments are threatened, like, one thing I thought, there's a scene at the very end where he confronts her about leaving, and he's clearly very angry about it. And he goes into that kind of, like, awful place of, like, not having empathy for her decision, but, you know, I'm mad at you because what are you doing to me? Mm-hmm. And she just calls him right out. She says, you know, I think the exact quote is like, this isn't about you. This is what I have to do for myself. And I thought that was such a perfect illustration of where he is, because he's attached to these people, but it's not an attachment of empathy. It's an attachment of, this is my Padawan. And if I lose if my Padawan gets killed, what does that mean about me? If my wife dies, what does this mean about me? And I think he genuinely cares for them, but I think it's very much that attachment style of possession and of ego and of, if these things aren't there, then that's an attack on me.
Well, and it's like back to control, which is something we've talked about with Anakin through this whole series, right? Like, he has this need to control everything. Mm-hmm. And I mean, like, he went out and did it. He proved that Ahsoka was innocent. He found the real person who was guilty. And now Ahsoka gets to come back into the Jedi Order and be his Padawan again. And that's, like, what he's put into place. And for Ahsoka to just reject that, he's like, no, that's not my plan. That's not what I had designed here. Yeah. So I think it's that loss of control, too, which is making him angry. Like, realizing he can't control Ahsoka.
I think that's very true. So I have a couple other little things to comment on. Is there any other kind of big themes or character moments that we want to dive into?
I think a big theme is the birth of the Empire, or like the pre-Empire, in the imagery of these episodes. The prison where Ahsoka is held also appears to be maybe like a barracks and or landing pad for Star Destroyers, because there's a bunch of them flying around in the background. And the building is just menacing. It is like architecturally very, I'm just going to say Nazi Germany, the style that they built things and the way that they staged stuff with the flags and the banners and the lights, all of it. There's constantly troops marching around, and there was actually statues. There were giant statues, like I'm talking like 30 or 40 feet tall, of clone troopers outside this building. And that was weird, but also adds to this very like Roman sensibility to the architecture, which the Nazis also built into their buildings. And it just, like, the way that Tarkin is also flexing his muscle politically, it just all reeks of Empire.
Yeah. I think there's like a scene too of like Tarkin walking down a hallway, like flanked with clone troopers, and like you commented, this is the Empire. Like, we are in the Empire now, basically.
Yeah. I mean, I think that's like that whole scene with Tarkin and Anakin about taking responsibility back from the Jedi. I think at this point, Tarkin doesn't want to destroy the Jedi, but he wants the Jedi in their place. He wants the military to be ruling and the Jedi to be kind of following their orders. And it's very much like the imperial idea, the fascist idea, of the military taking over. I think it's a great point, Riki.
And then just like small things, the titles of these episodes are all references to Hitchcock movies.
Oh, that's really cool.
Yeah, I definitely noticed it in the second one, which is the Jedi Who Knew Too Much. The Man Who Knew Too Much.
The episode names, but yeah, that's exactly right.
And then I wondered, and then it turns out, the other three in this arc are all references to Hitchcock movies.
To catch a Jedi is to catch a thief. Yeah.
That's the wrong Jedi is the wrong man. Yeah.
It's funny how, like, there are some times where these episodes are so well thought out and so intricately detailed, and there's the fugitive reference and the names reference, and there's just so many of those little details that make for just wonderful television. And then there's the droids episodes. Like, it's to me, it's like the frustration of this television show sometimes is that the highs are so good, and then the lows can sometimes be pretty bad.
I mean, like, even the droids episode, like, I know we were ragging on him pretty good, but I still think that the droid episode was better than the majority of, like, season 1. I think it's just the episode has gotten to a higher caliber. But yeah, this was all, like, the same writer. Riki, did you do any research into who this writer is?
I did not.
Okay, well then never mind. His name's Charles Murray. You go, Charles Murray. Yeah. I had one...
Charles Murray wrote all 4, and they're directed by 4 different people, and the last one is directed by Dave Filoni.
Yeah, which, like, a very common thing to have, like, your main producer direct the final episode of the season, or like in big important episodes like
especially given his relationship with Ahsoka, like, as a character. I think, I don't know if he actually created her, but it is often viewed that Ahsoka is Dave Filoni's child.
Yeah. And,
like, she's a character that he really cares about and wants to, and has developed into, like, a key piece of the Star Wars universe.
Yeah, and frankly, it makes me so excited about the Ahsoka show, because it just, you get the sense that he probably had so many story ideas of what would happen when Ahsoka walked away from the Jedi. And so now getting... Just the way she appeared in Mandalorian was great, but getting to see more of where she's going to go and in some of the other properties she's shown up in or will show up in is really exciting.
Yeah. I had another little thing, which is just, like, we talk about Ahsoka and Anakin in the first episode coming back to play detectives at the Jedi Temple. It's like... I know in your notes you're like, why are they getting Anakin and Ahsoka to do this? And Riki and I asked the same question, and they explain, like, oh, because this could be a Jedi and you guys were off-world, therefore you're the only 2 who are suited to investigate this. Like, there were really no other Jedi not in the Jedi Temple.
I mean, that's why I wrote that down, is because I definitely heard that line, and I didn't believe it. And I was like, Anakin and Ahsoka are two of the most hot-headed, emotional, not the right people.
And so they have a droid who's, like, working with them. And the droid's name is Russo ISC. And he seems very, like, CSI kind of a droid, trying to keep Anakin, like, these two young cops, Anakin and Ahsoka, in control, and, like, this is the way we're gonna do this thing. But they just completely disregard him.
Yeah. But the droid was also very good at his job.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it made me wonder why, if they have droids this competent at forensic work, they had that ridiculous Keystone Cop, in, like, the Senate assassination arc a couple of seasons ago.
Like, the monk guy? Yeah. Totally. Or even, like, if they have droids this competent, why are you even bringing Ahsoka and Anakin in on this? Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, it's a classic in Star Trek. It's the Enterprise problem, where some important galactic thing is happening, and the Enterprise happens to be the closest ship to it every time, because they're the characters.
It's the way you have to tell the story, but it's still worth poking a bit of fun at. But I think you're getting at something really important, because I hadn't even put this together. In many ways, what happens with that droid is it's one more part of the Republic becoming the Imperial machinery, saying, Jedi, we don't need you. The droid a couple times says, like, we can do this better than you. And I think it's just highlighting that, like, everyone's kind of realizing, like, maybe we don't need these space wizards who live up in their big tower and tell us what to do all the time and are so, like, unknowable and mysterious. Like, I think it's another great part of this.
Yeah, for sure.
Couple little things that I loved. First of all, there's a scene on, what looks like kind of a monorail train type thing, which, it's obviously kind of high tech, but it also looks kind of like dirty and grungy. And to me, as a kid who grew up in New York City in the late 70s and 80s, it looks exactly like the subway trains of my youth. Like, just the way the chairs are laid out and the way people are standing or sitting, and just the dirtiness of it. I felt like it was definitely animated by someone who had seen those subway trains, if not ridden on them themselves at some point. So I loved that. And then also just kind of hitting more on the Ahsoka and Ventress stuff. There's one line that I wrote down because it's just so good. Ahsoka kind of gives Ventress the speech of, like, look, we may have to fight some clones who come to arrest us, but we can't kill any of them. And so they get in this fight, and it's pretty brutal, but, and the clones who come to arrest them actually get, their butts kicked 8 different ways to Sunday, but none of them are actually dead. And Ventress just says, in that wonderful sort of deadpan drawl she has, see, didn't kill one. It's a new me. And I just love that line so much.
That actually reminded me of a little of Terminator 2, when John Connor orders the Terminator not to kill anyone, and then he starts shooting people in the kneecaps.
Yes.
And Connor's like, what are you doing? What are you doing? And he's like, they'll live.
Which is funny. I hadn't even put it together, but when I recently rewatched that episode of Terminator for a different podcast I did, and watching him go for the kneecaps, I kind of wondered if that line in Firefly, where Shepard Book says, I'm not allowed to, the Holy Book tells me not to kill, and he cocks a shotgun and says, it is, however, quite silent on the topic of kneecaps. And I kind of wonder if that was a little bit of a Terminator reference there.
Huh. I've never seen Terminator.
Well then, next movie to get.
Yeah. Gosh. I liked what you were saying about the New York City subway train. And I think it also, like, the grunginess of it kind of highlights the gap between the upper echelons of Coruscant, who are, like, the Jedi Temple, the Jedi Order, and, like, the regular everyday people living on Coruscant. And I love that we get to see more of that in season 7.
Mm-hmm.
And speaking of the mood of this episode, I felt like it was raining for most of them. Like, there's a lot of rain.
Well, it's film noir.
Yeah. And at one point there was the classic scene shot of the building, this Imperial prison. Mm-hmm. And there's just, like, thunder and lightning in the background.
Yeah, I've recently been watching
a nice touch.
Some of the older Batman animated shows, both episodes from Batman the Animated Series and especially Batman Beyond, which is an episode about that for superhero ethics. And honestly, that's what it made me think of, like, animated Gotham, where all the buildings are tall and have these very long shadows, and everything is imposing and very sort of like gothic, and rains everywhere. And that's definitely the aura I was getting. Like you said,
well,
film noir.
The opening credits where he's at the end of the opening credits where he's standing on the rooftop and the lightning like illuminates him for just a moment.
Oh yeah,
like that sensibility.
Yeah. Here's a fun Batman the Animated Series fact.
Uh-oh.
Why? Oh, it's a fun fact. The animation was done on black paper. And it was like
so goth. I love it.
I know, and it was the darkest show on television, like for that time, in terms of like color value, not necessarily content. It's still a kid show, but yeah, it was like tonally the darkest that they were airing, and it's just I don't know. I really love it. I love the art style. It's so beautifully done. I think they spent like they went way over budget, and like I guess their animators would work overtime for free, basically to get this show animated because it was just like so gorgeous. But yeah.
We're now deep into tangent land, so I'm just going to do 2 quick things about that and then drag us back. But one is that's a beautiful story, but I hate the idea of artists working and not getting paid for it. Just like, come on, Warner Brothers, pay them. But also, I hadn't realized that, and I love that darkness in it. And I hate the idea that maybe that's why Zack Snyder thinks that every DC property has to be dark. But anyway, deep into tangent land, let me pull us back. The one other thing I wanted to comment on is at the very beginning, we mentioned this, that it's Ahsoka who saves Anakin. And she's done things like that before, but I think this is one of the times where it's the most like stark, that like he is going to clearly die unless she saves him. And it kind of felt like we're setting up the idea that maybe she doesn't need a master anymore, that maybe she's no longer a Padawan because she's now saving him. You know, she is now, at least in terms of the Force, kind of like more like what Anakin and Obi-Wan are in Revenge of the Sith, where they're working together, but they're no longer master and Padawan, they're colleagues and comrades. And I certainly got the impression that when she's offered a chance to go back to the Jedi, they're basically saying, like, we want to bring you back, but as a Jedi Knight. Like, you wouldn't have to be a Padawan anymore. And whether or not that's true, I just love that scene in the context of everything else at the beginning, because I think it just really highlights, like, she's not really a Padawan anymore. She's ready to go out on her own.
Well, Anakin offers her, like, little Padawan hair accessory thing to her. But yeah. Sorry, Riki, what were you going to say?
Well, but also how important is it that she saves him? Because I'm going to try not to be too spoilery here, but something she deals with later on is the guilt of feeling like if she had been there, she could have stopped him from turning to the dark side in Revenge of the Sith.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, and I really loved the visual metaphor. Like, so the thing that Ahsoka is saving Anakin from is like a plane crash, basically. And I like he's being attacked by droids, nanodroids or something like that for some reason. It's not nanodroids. Buzzbots. I knew it was some ridiculous name. And she isn't. And so he's been attacked. He's passed out, and R2 is like relaying this information to Ahsoka that like the plane's not working. It looks fine from the outside, but she's like, tip your wing and show me underneath the plane. And R2 like tips up and shows that like the underbelly is just crawling with these buzzbots. So the idea of like things are looking fine on the surface, but there's this like seedy underbelly.
That's so good, yeah.
Yeah, I think that's like a fun little visual metaphor that sets us up for these 4 episodes.
That's also, it reminds me of Iron Man, right? When the 2 fighters go after Iron Man and then they like think they've lost him, but he's actually hanging on to one of them, and they're like, hey, like tip up. And he does it. He's like, there's a man on your underbelly.
Well, and doesn't like the Millennium Falcon do that to some ship? Like land?
Yeah. The Millennium Falcon like makes a run at a Star Destroyer bridge and then like attaches itself to the back of it.
Yeah. Well, I think that's such a good point. And it drives home for me, because we're talking so much about Ahsoka, this is kind of one of my hopes for the future, is that the relationship between Ahsoka and Anakin is so powerful, and that there's a beautiful shot at the end of this where, as you said, they take away this like Padawan hair thing, and then Anakin offers it back to her, and she puts it in his hand and does the thing of like closing his hand around it, and it's just this like poignant, beautiful moment. And I mean, one of the things you think about is that at the point of the story that now a lot of the new material is going to come out at The Mandalorian, this time right after Return of the Jedi, Ahsoka's really the only one still around who knew Anakin before he became Vader, who remembered, who knew him and has really fond memories of him, who really cared for him. I don't know what it's going to look like, but I need them to in some way give me the moment on screen where Ahsoka realizes that Anakin turned back to the good side. Because as you brought up, Riki, I think, she's clearly so upset about the fact that he turned to the dark side and she couldn't save him. I don't know where it's going to happen. I don't know when it happened, but, whether it's she talks to Luke because of Grogu, or she talks to Force Ghost Obi-Wan, or even, I don't know what it is, but I need to see that moment on screen when she realizes that in the end, Anakin defeated Anakin came back.
I mean, if we're talking Force Ghosts,
he's a
talk to Anakin.
Yeah. That's possible too,
but not Hayden Christensen. Change that scene at the end of Return of the Jedi.
Yeah.
Original Force Ghost, please.
We're gonna talk about the new Kenobi show when it comes out, and I'm gonna do my best to be excited about it. But God, of all the things I want in Star Wars, Hayden Christensen coming back and a rematch of Obi-Wan Anakin is absolutely not on those lists.
Yub Nub.
Yeah, bring back Yub Nub. That's the better political fight. All right, well, I think that's a good stopping point. Is there anything else either one of you wanted to mention?
No.
Nope.
Awesome. Well, great. Thank you all so much for this conversation. To those folks listening at home, let us know what you think. We'd love to know what you think of these episodes. What do you think of Ahsoka's journey? And did you want to see the Ahsoka Ventress team-up movie? What do you think of Palpatine? And I'm going to tell you how to contact us, but first I wanted to announce, folks, that we just finished Season 5, and we'll be starting Season 6, and we'll be bringing back the book club pretty soon. But next week, we're going to be doing a movie. We're kind of trying to insert a movie in between all of the seasons, and we're doing The Last Jedi. And for that one, Riki and Sarah will be my guests, along with Ashley Coffin, as the four of us discuss it. And as we've done in the last couple of movies, we're going to be recording a podcast, so it will come out as a podcast, but we're also going to be recording it live on Twitch. So all four of us will be on camera talking about the episode, and because it's live on Twitch, you can be in the chat room, you can send us questions, you can give us feedback, you can tell us what idiots we are, you can tell me how good my hair looks, whatever you want to do. But it'll all be live, it'll be a great time to discuss the movie. So definitely, check that out. It'll be Stranded Panda, twitch.com/Stranded Panda TV, and that link will be in the show notes as well as all over the strandedpanda.com. So definitely check that out. And like I said, if you want to be in contact with us, best way to reach us is by searching for The Ethical Panda on Facebook or Twitter. You can reach me that way. You can also email at theethicalpanda@gmail.com, or you can just go to the website, theethicalpanda.com, and that's where you'll find stuff about all the other podcasts I'm doing along with this one. And lastly, if you go to strandedpanda.com, that's where you'll find all the other great podcasts that are part of the Stranded Panda podcast network that these podcasts are a part of. There's lots of other great content. The way we look at Star Wars, other people there are looking at the MCU. They're doing great episodes on Falcon and the Winter Soldier. At DC, if you want to hear more thoughts on the Snyder Cut, Star Trek, all sorts of other great things. And the last announcement I'll make about that is very connected actually to what we're doing here. A new show is going to be coming out quite soon on the Stranded Panda Podcast Network called Animation Deliberation. And myself and one, if not possibly both of the co-hosts of that animation show will be teaming up to cover The Bad Batch, the new Star Wars show that's releasing starting on May the 4th. So definitely check that out. We love going over this old content, but it's going to be really fun to have new Star Wars content to talk about. And I know the animation guys are really excited from that direction, so it'll be a great show. So Riki, Sarah, thank you so much for being a part of this. To everybody else listening, thank you so much for being... To all your listeners, thank you so much, and have a great day.
Kenobi.
No Grievous. That's the one thing we missed.
No Grievous. Did you actually miss Grievous?
No, not the slightest.
Okay.